Hello, Game of Her Own listeners. It is, if you're listening to this when this episode airs, it is December 30th. And the Game of Her Own team is taking some time off to hang out with friends and family and celebrate the holidays. And we look forward to coming back to you guys next week with brand new episodes. But for now, we are taking it back in time to episode number 32 with the Director of Event Strategy and Fan Engagement for the NFL, Heather Nanberg. This is another fan favorite episode. So if you've listened to it in the past, it is worth re-listening to it. Heather throws out some gems and she talks all about seizing the opportunity. And if this is a first for you, you're going to be in for a pleasant surprise. So I hope you all enjoy the rest of what's left of our holidays. Happy New Year to all of you and enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast, a podcast about women who work in sports. I'm your host, Jahaan Blake. After 15 years of working for 3 major league teams, including the Boston Red Sox, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Chicago Cubs, I discovered the one thing I loved the most was helping women in sports shatter glass ceilings and take their seat at the table. I loved it so much that I made a business out of it. I have the honor of coaching high-performing women in the sports and entertainment industry and supporting them as they go after exactly what they want in their career. So if you are feeling tired of waiting on the sidelines, done being overlooked for promotions, and you're ready to pull ahead of the pack and take your career to the next level, girl, I'm here for it. I also created the Game of Her Own podcast to support you as well. We are here to share the stories of incredible women who work in sports and entertainment. These leaders and trailblazers will inspire you with their success and the lessons they've learned along the way to the top. Ladies, there is nothing like women empowering women. I am so honored you're here. My next guest has worked on some of the world's biggest events. And I'm not going to lie, I feel incredibly lucky that I've had the chance to work on 5 Super Bowls and a few Pro Bowls. And as a result, my path has crossed with Heather Nanberg, Director of Event Strategy and Fan Engagement for the NFL. This means that I got to see some of the incredible work that she's doing up close and personal. She leads some incredible initiatives for the NFL. And as we all know, leading big initiatives for big organizations is not always easy. Listen in as Heather talks about her unexpected journey in sports, how she seized opportunities, and what she believes you need to do in order to implement a successful new initiative. We packed a lot into our 45 minutes. All right, ladies, it's time. Let's jump in. All right, Heather, I'm so excited. Welcome to the Game of Her Own podcast.
Thanks, Jahaan. I'm so excited to be here.
So I need you to take us all back in time. And before we get into everything that you do now, which is incredible, take us back in time and tell us when you first fell in love with sports.
Yeah, for me, sports is such an interesting thing because I didn't grow up in a sports family, and I grew up in New York City where sports wasn't everywhere. As a little kid, I remember loving baseball and being so passionate about the World Series one year that I cried and cried when my team lost. Sure. And I swore I would never watch sports again. And I literally didn't. I stopped. I was like, I got too passionate about it and too into it. And I was like, I can't do this. And so I started falling in love with sports more so in college. I went to University of Maryland. They weren't super able to do a lot of sports when I was there, dating myself. Started going to football games, and that was like my first time actually going to a live football game and got to feel what that excitement was like in person. And then for me, my path is not sort of straight and narrow into the sports world. I pursued an acting and theater career for several years. So really loved that production and the sense of building up to this moment in time and the adrenaline rush of that. And when I started working at the NFL, that was when everything kind of came together for me, realizing how much sports is very similar to theater and production and requires that, frankly. And so many lessons that are learned in sports are similar to lessons that are learned in any sort of a ensemble kind of a working environment, like theater, like singing. I also used to do a ton of singing. So to me, I've grown to love sports more so through my career than like many people who are sort of brought up that way, you know, loving a team specifically. I now have a daughter and she really loves sports. But again, we live in New York City and she doesn't have as many opportunities to play as we would like and as she would like. But I think she's someone who has sort of seen me in my role and kind of understands that, you know, being part of a team like that is something that is really life-changing and something to really strive for.
You know what, Heather, you just said a lot, and I have a lot of like different questions. So first of all, can we go back to the World Series and you cried and you didn't want to watch sports anymore? Who was your team? Who lost? Talk about that game.
So my parents are from Maryland, and I was rooting for the Baltimore Orioles, even though I'm a lifelong New Yorker. And it was the Orioles and the Pittsburgh Pirates. And I remember just being as I said, crying, being so upset, my dad letting me stay up late to watch the end of the World Series and really feeling crushed. And I was like, oh, I'm never doing that again. You know, like it's one of those things like watching like a Benji movie or one of those like heart-wrenching, like cry your eyes out and like, okay, not doing that. No more tearjerkers. Yeah, so it really impacted me in a big way, and I swore it off for several years after that.
Wait. So how old were you?
I was probably maybe 9 or 10.
So it sounds like you had like your first heartbreak at the age of 9 or 10 at a very young age.
Yes, definitely.
Usually it's by some like boy in the playground or whatever. For you, it was the World Series.
It really was. And I remember just being like, really, I felt like if I cheer loudly enough and I am excited enough that they'll win, but it didn't work. And then I had a lot of resentment towards Pittsburgh afterwards.
Have you let that go yet?
Yes, I have. I've grown.
You know, what's so interesting is, and I feel like I've watched your work and I'm reading your bio, I'm prepping for this, and I'm thinking, I saw the thing about acting, your acting career, and I had no idea. What was that like, and what made you want to make the switch and start working in a different career?
Yeah, so it was one of those things that was a moment when kind of what I was doing turned into what I should be doing. I pursued acting coming out of college in New York City, was part of theater companies and, you know, tried to get other film work and really loved it and loved being a part of that world, but couldn't support myself. So started getting temp jobs, different places, and really have had like 20, 30 different bosses and temp jobs and so many different experiences with that. And then worked in events and entertainment and got a temporary position at the NFL. So was not looking specifically, how do I break into sports? Knew that I loved doing event production, was super excited to start working at the NFL. And I started off in strategic planning and business development, which is not at all related to events, is not really at all how I envisioned myself working. But what I realized was that working at a place like the NFL, you have access to producing and being a part of the Super Bowl and some of the biggest events that are produced in the world. And so I was able to make the transition from being a temp to the events department really by just offering to help. So I was very fortunate to sort of meet new people who were also starting out, who were at my same level. And there are just so many opportunities to pitch in, to say, hey, I'd like to help. I can do that. Do you need any help with anything? So it was literally one of those things where starting off with the NFL draft that used to be produced in New York at Radio City, just volunteering my time and saying, hey, do you guys need any help? I'd love to be a part of it. And then getting to know that events team. So many people who you and I have both worked with for many years, some others who've come and gone, but getting to know them and offering my support, and then them being able to see what I could do got me to the next place within within my career. And one of the most important people, I would say, would have been Jim Steig, who used to lead the NFL events team. So many, many years ago, when I was a temp working in strategic planning and business development, I went to him and just said, hey, I'd love to pitch in and be a part of the draft. And so he gave me a chance there. And then he'd be like, hey, do you want to come back and support us? And this was literally like support work, administrative work, stuffing bags, grunt work, operational work. But I loved it. And I loved being a part of the event. So supported him at a couple of Super Bowls as like an assistant to the assistant, and got to see him lead the Super Bowl for several years. And that was something that really lit a fire in me, where I was like, this is where I am supposed to be. Sometimes things happen for a reason. I've loved pursuing acting and theater, and still do that on the side when I have time, which isn't very often. But found that the sports world had I felt like I was home, felt like I could be part of this family and part of this greater purpose that you feel so much when you're working for Super Bowl or working for a specific event. That is really, really hard to find in any other industry and in any other sort of circumstance.
Tell everybody what your title is now, what you do.
Yeah, so I am the director of event strategy and fan engagement. And really, I've been so fortunate to have developed that role. It wasn't something that existed previously that I sort of applied for. When I started off in the events department, we were developing a hospitality group called NFL on Location. So from working in business strategy, I was able to jump into events in a role overseeing some of the marketing and strategy around NFL on Location, which has since now become its own business, which is separate from the NFL. So we put together corporate hospitality packages, fan packages to attend all of the NFL's tentpole events. And it's funny because I had been in strategy and business planning, I was put in this strategy business planning role for On Location. But I said, you know what? I really love doing event operations and production. And can I please move over into that? So after a few years, one of my colleagues left and I was able to move into doing that. So I used to produce all of the hospitality events on site at Super Bowl and any other NFL On Location event. So those were large scale, 5,000, 10,000 people parties and events that grew and grew over the 10 years that I did that. And I really loved it and got to do really what I think I'm most passionate about, which is building these experiences for fans to really get to take, so that we're creating lifetime memories and really doing something that you can't do anywhere else. So yeah, I didn't intend on leaving On Location, but On Location left the NFL. And I was able then to work within the events team to sort of say, hey, I want to stay here. I want to continue to develop my event production skills. And so I now oversee the Pro Bowl event operations, which is such a unique and amazing event, and something that I feel really connected to because it's an opportunity to really celebrate the players. And there are two events like that we have, the Pro Bowl and the draft. Both feel like these really authentic ways to celebrate the players. For me, I always have to connect some sort of meaning to it. So I do feel as though my work means something to those players, to those families when they're there on site, and then also provides opportunities for fans to have these really meaningful experiences. Last year with draft, for instance, I oversee the draft main stage and I get to be back in the prospect green room for draft. So you get to experience the prospects at this monumental time in their life when it's just this life-changing moment for them and for their families. And they bring their grandma and they bring their mom and they bring, their whole extended family. To be a part of that is something that's so cool and special. And then to have the opportunity for fans to be able to get a glimpse of it, like we did just this past year with draft, when draft was virtual, I think is something that really sets apart what we do from so many other industries and even other sports. So That's a sort of a long-winded way of telling you that I love what I do. I'm passionate about it. I find it really fulfilling. And I'm really proud of the work that I get to do for the NFL. And I guess the one other piece that I didn't mention, so I oversee Pro Bowl event operations, Fans First, which is our guest services program, which you know well, guest services and staff appreciation program. So that's yet another piece of what my work is that, again, is fulfilling for me because it's giving back. It's a sense of, all of the frontline staff who are out there working directly with all of our fans, being able to appreciate them and show them how much they matter is something that I find really rewarding. So I would say, my job has really been something that has been built with different sort of leaning into different passions that I've had over the years, and by having really found wonderful support at the league. So people who've helped me to be able to take that on.
I'm taking notes over here because you're saying all these really good gems. And I was like, I have to ask more. So I have a question. And this question is really for, let me pause and preface this with, this podcast is for all levels, right? You can be trying to get into sports. You can be in sports. You can be an executive. I've heard from everybody who listens, which I think is wonderful that people like you are just giving this great advice and helping people and empowering them. But let's give a little nugget to those who are trying to get in and work in sports. And it's funny that we're interviewing, I'm interviewing you today because I've heard from a lot of people, maybe it's something in the universe, but the last couple of weeks, I've had some calls with women who are trying to get into sports, specifically the NFL. And all the things you just said, and ending it with, it's fulfilling and it serves my passion and I feel great about it and I love my job, is what they're saying. They're like, I want to work for the NFL. I want to do all these things. And I just feel like it's the right place for me. What advice would you give to them to get in, to get that job?
As I was kind of hinting about this earlier, as much as it feels a little frustrating sometimes, I think volunteering and getting close to the kind of work that you want to be doing is a monumental stepping stone, because people get to know you. People will then, if there are opportunities, they will think of you. And it really is about, as much as you wouldn't think of that as networking, that really does give you an opportunity for networking. So things like when we are developing events in different locations for the Super Bowl, for the draft, some of those volunteers, we've had volunteers at Pro Bowl who've come year over year over year, and we know their names. And if they were then to submit for a role, we would know them and know their work. And similarly, if there was something that was specific to what we were looking for and we knew somebody who had those skills, it's just provides us a way to reach out to new talent as well. So not to say that every volunteer opportunity, as you know, is a stepping stone to a job, but it's just one more way to get closer to what you are really interested in. For me, I took a temp job at the NFL, and we have other people in our department even who have taken on temporary roles with no promise of that will become a permanent role, but the experiences that you have can lead you to that. So I would say get as close to whatever it is that you are interested and passionate about, whether it's, marketing, whether it's events, whether it's, whichever sports league it may be. If you can find ways to show your specific skills and to get close to those events. I mean, that's sort of how things have worked organically for me, even from within. So when I was a temp in business planning and strategic planning and business development, the other thing I would say is always always step up, always bring your A game, because even though that was not my world and not what I was looking to do at the time, I just sort of always was like, okay, I'm going to put my game face on. I'm going to be here. I'm going to be committed to this. And opportunities came from that, and mostly came from other women, from mentors, from people who would say, hey, what about, Heather, she's working really hard over here. Why don't you invite her to come to this meeting? Or why don't you give her this responsibility? So there have been a lot of coincidental things like that have happened because people know you. I think that would be sort of from an entry level suggestion kind of advice. And then I think certainly once you are already in a position and you're interested in moving into sports, I think sports is like anything else in that there are a lot of transferable skills that we need within the sports industry. So people who are in our marketing department, on the marketing team, people in finance, people in many different worlds. I've seen them and known them and worked with them, and many of them have moved within. So if you're starting off, in finance, for instance, one of my really close colleagues, Kathleen, started off in finance. And then she did volunteer within our organization, similar to what I did. So you can sign up to be a rotational staff person on an event. And then when a role becomes available, all of us know that person and say, oh, that person would be great. We're all recommending them. So again, it's like putting yourself out there whenever you have those opportunities, and also not pigeonholing yourself. Like it has to be the perfect role for me at the organization. If you know that that's an organization that you're interested in, or you want to get into sports, take the role that you can get and then turn it into what you want it to be.
Yes, I love that. And I love the volunteering, and just what you said earlier too, is just offering to help. Mm-hmm. Right. So like your career at the NFL, you started as a coordinator. You're now a director, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but outside looking in, I don't feel like the NFL is just throwing out titles. Like you all work for your titles. They're not, no one's fast tracked, right? Like it takes a while. They're not the same. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not the same as it is in other organizations when it comes to titles. And so what I hear you saying is to move up with responsibility, forget the title, just to move up with more responsibility, you just have to put yourself out there and be willing to offer to help, even if it's outside of your job description. Did I get that right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I also feel as though many of the projects that I've started working on were things that nobody wanted, things that nobody else in the department was focused on. And so I sort of stepped in and said, let me take that. I'll take that and turn it into something. And then those are the roles that people notice, and then does wind up turning into promotion down the road. If you're able to turn something that nobody was interested in or nothing into something like our Fans First program, which really wasn't something that everyone was focused on. And that's our guest services and customer relations training and recognition program. I, from the beginning, was really interested in that and thought it was so important because, what the staff are communicating to our fans is really the most important piece of their experience. Mm-hmm. They're going to run into the staff at every turn, everywhere they go within a stadium or within any event. They're not going to see a CEO sitting in an office. They may not see me either, but they'll see the person who's there taking their ticket. They'll see the person who's working the concession stand. So if you're able to sort of create this ethos around your brand that then transfers down into every single staff member, you're just developing this whole overarching experience that is really special and unique and becomes something that is identifiable as part of the NFL, part of the Super Bowl. But when we were first thinking about guest services, there wasn't anybody who was really focused on it, and it was sort of a throwaway. So that's been one of the things that I think has been successful for me is I've always shown up, I've always been committed. And if somebody says, okay, you take on this program, I've really done it and really gone for it. I've never thrown anything away, anything that has been offered to me as far as opportunities. I always really try to take them seriously, dive into them, do the best I can. And for me, I feel as though that has been recognized. I know it's not always, and sometimes you feel like you're doing work that nobody sees, and that's certainly a common feeling. But I do feel, for me at least, that's been something that has been helpful for me career-wise.
Hey, Jahaan here. I hope you're enjoying the interview. I'm sure you are thinking about your own career right now and how you can pull out in front of the pack to take your career to the next level. For 18 years, supporting women in sports has been my favorite part of my career, and I would love to support you. Whether it's joining my free Game of Her Own community or one of my one-on-one coaching programs, I am here for you. Send me a message at jblake@jahaanblake.com or DM me on Instagram at jahaanblake. And let's schedule a time to have a free session. I cannot wait to hear from you. All right, let's get back to why you're here. You know, you're talking about fans first and the NFL's customer service philosophy. And I mean, I've seen the work firsthand that you guys are doing, and it's incredible. So when you're telling me this story that like guest services at one point in time was a throwaway, like you had to be a change agent to make all this happen and get it to where it is now. Like that to me is amazing. So talk to us a little bit about how you went about rallying people in your office around this idea and this concept and showing the value of it.
When we started, we were in a place where, as I said, people weren't very focused on it. We were, from an event operations standpoint, really focused on making sure the event went smoothly, but not thinking so much about the guest services experience. And all of our clubs were much more focused on that because from a day-to-day, they're, going through all of their game day routines, and they're the ones who are out there with the fans more regularly. So really it started for me with tapping into all of the existing talent at the clubs. So all 32 clubs now have guest services or guest relations leaders or a whole leadership team, whereas they didn't many years ago. So I would say the biggest way that we were able to really get Fans First established was by tapping into success stories coming out of the clubs. So the clubs could share that, they had their guest relations staff interacting with fans, and we would do surveys of those particular clubs and get back really interesting data about how impactful the fans were saying their experience with an individual staff person was. And so some of that anecdotal stuff. Also with Fans First, we have a way that we collect stories from all of our teammates. So sharing those stories, when you tell somebody about a staff person sharing their story about how they went above and beyond, how they really impacted somebody's experience at an event, and then also get the feedback from the fan side that says, wow, I met this person at the game on Sunday. They really changed my whole experience. They ran over and helped me out with my bus situation or with, very specific things. I think that storytelling piece of it is something that really resonates with people. So we were able to really show, after putting the Fans First program together for the first year, that we had made a lot of those a lot of strides with improving the customer experience. The fan feedback was, I think, key to that. So research and data is something that people can't sort of scoff at once they see it. And then I think too, having our exec team on site and seeing it firsthand, we started doing some videos, smaller videos, just internal, to show our executive team, hey, look what an impact this makes. Look at how this staff member felt really rewarded, really appreciated, and how they paid that forward in their interaction with a fan. So we continue to look for ways to make the program more embedded in everything we do, but we now work closely with all 32 teams to have their guest services managers come out to our tentpole events and to have it be more integrated into basically the whole league-wide philosophy around fan service.
I think what you just said can apply to really anybody trying to, make change. What I'm hearing you say is the research, the data is important. So it's the quantitative, but also the qualitative, right? Like the data, the data that has like a story, right? Mm-hmm. And then showing the executive team and helping them understand. So taking them along for the ride so they understand mm-hmm. what you're out there doing all the time. And then I'm also hearing collaboration. So for you, it was collaboration and being inclusive across the league. Did I get that right?
Yeah, definitely. And I also think that what you're hitting on too is being open-minded to other people's views and advice. So taking the experts' advice, not thinking that you know it, all yourself. For us as a league office, we're in a very unique environment in that we're based in New York City. We're in more of an office environment day to day, except for when we're out doing our tentpole events. But our clubs just have so much more experience in the event environment because that's their every day, is that they're in the stadium working with fans. So acknowledging that and sort of going to them as the experts to be able to tap into that was something really key too.
That's good. You just gave, 6 good tips on how to like impact change and like get your idea and your initiative going and make it have legs, right? Mm-hmm. We all have great ideas. And then, I think I know I've been there in my career where like you have a great idea and you think it has legs and then all of a sudden it just dies. But if you're following these 6 things, which I learned later in my career, it helps. Especially the last one you just hit on, is that you're just being open-minded and taking the experts' advice. Like you don't always have all the answers, and that's okay.
Right.
Like, that doesn't make you any less than. Like it makes you better if you're going to listen and gather all that data. That's great.
Listening has been something that for me, I feel like I'm kind of more of that personality in general. So I typically do a lot of listening and digesting things before maybe to a fault sometimes, before I'm ready to put things out there. But I also feel like that has been a little bit of my secret all along, has been I'm the one who's paying attention and listening, and then able to put that, all those learnings toward accomplishing goals.
You're out here, you're crushing it, right? You're having a great career, and clearly it's obviously not over, but you're having a great career and you're doing all these things. And as I'm listening, I'm wondering, talk to us a little bit about if you've ever dealt with imposter syndrome. Did you have those moments of self-doubt along the way? So I'm being nosy and gonna ask you to get candid with us.
Okay. Yeah, for sure. I think everybody does to a degree. I can tell you for me, especially since I didn't start off with this ambition of let me get a job in the sports world, I was very much concerned that, okay, what am I doing here? Especially in the beginning in strategic planning and business development. I did not have that sort of a background whatsoever and definitely doubted myself. But over the years, I again really credit a lot of the people that I worked with who I watched and listened to and saw them bring themselves to every situation. So not trying to be somebody else, not trying to be this vision of this is what a sports executive should be looking like and talking like and acting like, but just really being themselves, truly. I had a woman who was a mentor at one point who was one of our chief financial officers. She just was the smartest person, not at all in my same category as far as work. She was doing finance and business planning, and I was working in events and much more focused on operations at that point too. But she was just the most down-to-earth person. She was in these very high-level meetings, but spoke in a way that was true to her, not in this sort of executive speak or not putting on, some sort of complicated way of expressing herself. She just was herself. And I found that so impressive. And have tried to, and it actually gave me a lot of confidence too, because I sort of felt like I'm going to bring myself. And I also think that's something that comes with age too, like the longer that I have been working at the league. And I just feel as though I'm more confident to say, I don't know the answer to something, or to just express myself in the way that makes sense for me without trying to be someone who I'm not. I think for me, that has been that back in the day that was very self-sabotaging to try to be like somebody else who I saw doing something, because you're not that person and that's not ever going to feel good. And you're not able to really bring your best self when you're trying to be somebody else.
So the key thing right there is you just had to learn how to be your authentic self.
Right. Comfortably, which is not easy.
Yes.
It's not easy. Yes.
Yes, I completely agree with that. It is not easy. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable to be your authentic self, which is just a whole lot of,
right.
It's work, right? You have to be intentional about it and you have to practice it daily, and it's not easy.
Yes.
Okay. So let's stay candid a little bit more and talk some real talk. I'm just thinking about work in general, and this doesn't have to be specific to the NFL, but 18 years, right? Professional experience, or 19 years, I think you have. I hear a lot, and it breaks my heart when I hear women, clients, or just women I get together with happy hour talk about dealing with like toxic work environments. Right? Mm-hmm. And just like hitting those walls and having those experiences and them being so deflating and heartbreaking. Is there any advice that you would give to women who are dealing with that?
Yeah, I have had those toxic environments, and I think sadly many of us have. And hindsight is 2020, because when I was in those situations, I just put my head down and kept going, which is not the advice that I would give somebody today. And I think the world has changed a bit as well. So I would say look for a lifeline whenever you're in one of those situations, because I think that people are willing to help if they know what's going on. And for me, I wish I had known that. I was definitely in a situation where I worked for someone years ago who did not have my best interests at heart and was not looking to support me. And I wish that, and I've since had people say to me, oh, I wish you had come to me and talked to me. And I do wish that I had been brave enough to find some allies and have that support to get out of those situations. Because I think that, well, maybe this is just me being an optimist. I think that most people want to help, and most people want you to be happy in your work environment and want to find a solution for you, especially if you're someone who is, producing and doing really well. Nobody wants to see that. So I would say, the way to get out of it is to acknowledge it and to find a trusted ally that you can speak with about it candidly, so that you don't feel stuck, because we're never really stuck. There's always a way out. There's always a way out. You haven't found it yet, so sometimes you need someone else to help you with that.
That is fantastic advice. And there is always a way out. And I think I'm in the same boat you are. So when I, early in my career, being in those toxic work environments, those toxic situations, for me, I don't know about you, I just was like, I have to keep going, because if I do speak up, it's going to impact my chances of getting promoted, mm-hmm. getting more work. I don't want to be looked at as the difficult one. I'm just going to ignore what's happening. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, God, that is so draining on a person. Yeah. It's just exhausting. And I like what you said, is finding the courage to just talk to somebody, because you're right. And times have changed, and people do truly want to help you. So finding that ally and just having that conversation. But you're right. You have to find the courage to be able to do it.
Yeah, it's so worth it. And yeah, since that time, I feel as though I've done that more. So reached out when I've been in situations where I felt things weren't going well. But again, you have to have that trusted ally that you can go to with things, which people don't always have that. So I'm very fortunate. I think because I've been in my role for so long, I do have some trusted people who support me and I can support and I feel good about. But two, it can be somebody outside your organization as well. And it's also realizing that there's other stuff in the world. So for me, I've stayed in situations before where I'm like, why did I just stay there? Why didn't I go try? I mean, when I was much younger, I could have done all kinds of different things. Certainly I've been in temporal roles when I was pursuing acting, mm-hmm. worked at so many different places where people were really terrible, treated you terribly. And, things that you wouldn't think really happened in real life. But that's for another story, another day.
I was going to say, yeah, that sounds like another podcast episode.
Yeah. Those things have happened, and I've kind of looked back and said, why did I stay at the time? And it was because I was scared and I wasn't recognizing that I have the power to make my own decisions. There are other jobs. There are other things. You're not going to, die. But at the time, it feels like that. It feels like that level of, I'm jumping off a cliff if I do something. So I think some of that comes with age and with experience, is that you start to feel like I'm going to be okay regardless, and I don't need this.
Yes.
But yeah, it's hard to have that when you're younger and you're stuck in a situation.
Yeah.
So know that it's out there.
Yeah. And I agree. And I think too, it's it's harder when you're junior in your career, but then it's also harder if you face it for the first time when you're a little bit more senior in your career too, because you're like, I don't even, like, where do I even start with this? Like, I don't even know where to go to. And I do think that not giving it power and talking to somebody and having an ally. I have a client, she's so smart, and she started her new job and she was like, my goal is to find a few different allies, people that I can go to. And she like made that part of her strategic plan. I was like,
wow, that's so smart.
Fantastic. I was like, I don't even need to tell you. I mean, you already know why. I don't even need to tell you why that's so good. Like, so it's so smart to do that because you don't know when you're going to need to lean on those people. And it could be when you're in a toxic work environment, and it's really hard to start to form that relationship once you're in the situation, right? Like you need it before. And I like what you said too, is finding someone also outside of your organization.
Who can be supportive.
That's so helpful. And it's almost easier to share those stories, which like you said, some of them you're like, you can't make this stuff up and they can't believe this is actually happening to me, but it's hard to share it with somebody internally. So talking to somebody on the outside is a lot easier. Yes,
definitely. And also recognizing that, everyone is human, and there were times when I was intimidated by somebody's level or position and felt like, oh, I can't talk to them. And I've since realized that's completely false. Like most people actually are happy when you reach out to them, or because they feel a sense of they want to help you, or, want to mentor you, want to feel a sense of that they're someone you can come to. So for me, again, it was that one mentor that I had. She really changed my perception of some of the hierarchy within the organization, and thinking that there's sort of an untouchable group of people that, oh, I can't talk to them, or they wouldn't want to talk to me. That's not true, I think. And if somebody is too busy for you, then they'll let you know and you'll know that and you can move on. But I would say most people, I know people like to say work it's not personal, but I completely disagree with that. I think work is very personal. I think, and I didn't think that until more recently in my career. I used to think the same thing. I used to think like, no, well, I'm at work and it doesn't matter if I develop a relationship with this person or I don't. I've come to realize that that's one of the most important things, I think, is developing those relationships. And I wish I had known that earlier in my career. And that, what makes us human is something that can be an important connection, and then will ultimately support you in your career and in other places in life. So that was an important lesson for me.
Yes. I've always felt, I never understood when people were like, it's not personal, it's not work, it's work. Like you have to keep it separate. And I from a young age, I was like, I don't understand. I don't understand how to separate the two. I learned more how to separate my emotions from things, but I always felt like it was personal. So I 100% agree with you. Speaking of personal, so we know that you have a husband and a daughter.
Yes.
And we also know that you travel and work a ton. So talk to us a little bit, just real quick, on how you just balance it all.
It's been so interesting now that we're in this COVID, environment where we're staying home more, because I've had a lot of realizations of where I sort of say the same thing to myself now, like, how did I do that? But, because I'm traveling so much less, I would say, there isn't really a balance. There is I'm focused on home right now, or I'm focused on work right now. And it's about making sure that you're prioritizing where you need to. And that, I think, is the hardest part, because you always want to put your children and your family first, but your career your own happiness is tied to your own happiness. And so you need to find a good place for that as well. For me, I would say traveling is really challenging, especially with kids. But I guess I felt as though I was always here for any sort of important moments. And then I've also had a really strong support group. So I live close to my mom and my sister, and I always felt like my daughter has a surrogate if I'm not there. At least my mom is there for things. But it's certainly challenging. It's something that I think that all working moms, struggle with, is how do you sort of, make it all happen? And I think the reality is, and somebody once said this to me as well, and I sort of didn't like the answer, but I agree with it, is that you can't really balance it. It's more of you're focused on home at one point, you're focused on work at one point, and finding a way to prioritize those two things. There are certainly moments when I'm at an event that I'm not, calling home and I'm not talking to my family as much. And then remembering to take those same moments and to take that same level of care to protect your time with your family when you're home, I think is really key too, so that you feel a sense holistically of balance, but on a day-to-day, I think things are shift quite a bit.
That's good. That's really good advice. Thank you for sharing. And then speaking of advice, I keep having these natural segues. Speaking of advice, what is the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
I would say, to me, not as much of somebody saying, here's my advice to you, but witnessing some really good examples of people always bringing their best forward. I worked with a woman many years ago, and this was when I had just started, and she brought me along to all of her meetings. And when I was there to sort of take notes and follow her, and we would have just a random meeting on a Wednesday, and she'd be like, oh, wait a minute. And this was not like a fussy, fancy kind of a woman. She was very down to earth, but she would be like, oh, let me go. And she would go to put on her lipstick and sort of fix herself. And I remember thinking to myself, it's so weird. Why is she getting dressed up, like, making herself all fancy for this little meeting that we have with like 10 people down the hall? But it was, to me, that was her putting on her game face and showing up for it and taking it seriously. And that was what made her feel on. Like she would be sort of, and you could see the transformation in her. She would sort of be like, okay, well, blah, blah, blah. And then she'd sort of put her lipstick on, and she would really have this presence about her then. And she would bring that with her to the meeting. So not really a piece of advice, but definitely witnessing something, again, sort of listening and seeing what's going on. And I was like, oh, that's so key to this woman's success. Because then I would see her in the meeting and she was so on. Like that was the thing that sort of, I guess, made her feel like she was put together. She was ready to attack her day. So that is something that I've tried to take on, not obviously with a lipstick for me, but but just the concept of saying, okay, I'm getting ready. I'm going to show up. I'm bringing my best and bringing her real self. But it was also like, her most engaged self.
I like that. I know that feeling. I do it now, even though it's just me in this office,
right?
Which is also my second bedroom. But right, like I know that feeling of putting on my makeup, and like for me, like I know it's different for everybody. For me, it like makes me feel like taking it seriously. And I understand. When you said transformation, I was like, I know exactly what you mean, because it does. It's like it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, you're doing it for yourself, not for other people. You're doing it to say, okay, now I'm definitely taking this seriously. I'm bringing my best. I'm going to be engaged. And that goes so far, even in meetings and things where you feel like, for me, where there are times where we're so busy and you feel like, oh, I'm not prepared for this next meeting and I have this, just kind of saying, okay, I'm taking a breath and I'm showing up for it. Sometimes that's all you need, is just to really be listening and interacting and showing up.
Yes. Yes, I agree. Heather, this conversation has been fantastic. It is jam-packed with fantastic advice and stories. So if someone wanted to get in touch with you, how could they go about doing that?
I would say LinkedIn is probably the best way to do that. And I'll try and make sure I pay more attention to my messages. I'm always getting a little behind over there, but yeah.
All right, perfect. And you know what, also, we talked about volunteers. So it just popped in my head, in volunteering for the NFL at Super Bowl and stuff. So how does someone do that? I'm going to link to it in the show notes. And I know how, but everyone listening might not know how. How would you go about volunteering at a Super Bowl?
So this year, the Super Bowl is planned for Tampa. So depending on what host city we're working with, the host cities are the ones who pull together the volunteer database. So if you check with Tampa this year on their website, the host committee's website, they would have links there for how you can volunteer. Okay. And then same thing with draft or any of our major events. So depending on what major city we're in, that's where working with those host committees, we always post information on those host committee websites.
Fantastic. All right. So whatever links are available right now for host committees, I will add those to the show notes. Heather, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jahaan. This was such an awesome experience.
So what did you think of this episode? Do you know another woman who works or is aspiring to work in sports? Would you do me a favor and share this with them? It would mean so much if together we could support and inspire other women on their journey. And let's stay connected. I love meeting and talking to new people. Follow me on Instagram at Jahaan Blake and join the free Game of Her Own community by visiting jahaanblake.com. I can't wait to meet you.